This is our second attempt this evening. For some reason our live stream technology had an issue, but we are live now, hopefully. If you want the reference image of beautiful Radhika, we've taken photos of her and we have it in the description. If they're not there quite yet, then I'm sure Kelly will get them there in just a few moments. Due to the fact that we are scrambling to put up a new thing because for some reason the old live stream just fell through. So, without further ado, we're going to get started. Nicholas will be joining us later. He is one of our new interns here, or our new artist in resident, and we're excited to have you. And Didya is helping us with switchers, so she'll also be helping us with any of y'all's questions. Please ask any questions you want. We're here for y'all. This is for you. And it'll be Alex and I yet again painting this evening, and we're pretty excited about it. So without further ado, we're going to get started. All right. So back up and running. It wouldn't be a painting from life night unless there was some sort of hiccup. So it's not surprised me one bit. Okay, so right, I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes, and you can get in your pose, and we'll start it now.
Great.
All right.
Did you just put the timer on them?
I did.
So Christopher Barraclough says, hello from Manchester, England.
Hey, Christopher. Thanks for joining us. Got to be pretty late in the evening now over there, so we appreciate all of our night owls who join us. It's funny, we have a good spectrum of early morning risers and night owls here. So over time, I think all of us have found our rhythm with it. But I think Alex is a bit more of an evening guy, and I'm a bit more of a morning guy. But since I think all of us have been decently disciplined in trying to get up and paint at the same time, I think that we've almost found some sort of homeostasis between the two.
So there's hello from Hampshire, UK, hello from Chicago, and hello from Hamburgshire.
Oh, wow.
And then someone asked, what actually is an artist resident? Does he learn if he cleans or prepares food for free?
Man, it'd be great if you brought me coffee every morning, wouldn't it? No, we don't have any form of hazing the resident while they're here. No, basically one of the visions that East Oaks is all about is that what we wish we could do for many, we do for a few. And so how we have it set up is we have one or two artists at any given time that we feel want to try to launch their career, who've kind of already studied and trained, and we try to give them an opportunity that allows for there to be a bit of margin of time and financial stability so that they can kind of get on their feet, and to be around other artists that are doing it professionally so that they see what kind of discipline it takes. And because of those things, we found that if we do an artist in resident program where they can come for 3 or 6 months and just learn underneath us, and kind of really by sort of just being around us, we try to spend time with them, help them kind of feel like, give them a bit of direction where they should go, and from there they really kind of just take off and work on their own projects while they're here, we're around for them to ask questions. And, when we're on breaks or stuff, talk about different things in the art world.
So we really love doing it, but at this moment we only do it for 3 people. So a girl named Caroline Nelson, who's a fabulous painter, Divya Melaluka.
Sorry,
It was
Wait.
there. All right, everybody. Sorry we had a little bit of a sound issue, but I think we've got it solved. So Divya Melaluka, Alex's wife, Alex Venezia's wife, and then Nicholas were our artist in resident at the moment. Okay. Might need to readjust this just a little bit. I think I have tape on this, so I'm gonna try to shift it minimally.
Can you do a mic
Check, check, check.
Yes.
Cool. Hopefully Divya has the cameras on Alex more than mine at the moment, because I have 2 marks up so far. Not much to see here.
So, Vincent Torres says, painting while watching you guys have fun from Miami.
Awesome. I hope that means you're painting along with us. It's a lovely model we have this evening.
Tina Figarelli says, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Any advice on stopping oil paint, specifically darks, from sinking in? I tried switching from gesso to oil ground, but to no avail. Is it a surface issue?
So typically what happens when sinking in happens is it is a amount of oil to the ratio of pigment in your paint, and there's a couple of ways to solve it. Usually it happens with your darker colors, especially if it's the second layer. So what I usually recommend is to you can do a couple of things. One, some people use a medium called Galkid that helps. You can add more oil or a sun-thickened linseed oil to your mix. The Galkid will help it actually dry a little bit faster, and when it dries, it will not be nearly as sunken in. But the other thing is just making sure that you add just a hint more oil to your darks. Sinking in will also just happen typically, and usually before I start painting on an area, I'll add a bit more oil to that area, or I will add a bit of oleo gel to that area. So it's kind of part of the fat over lean as well, but mainly happens with darker colors, especially like with burnt umber, raw umber, and blacks, blues, and a few other colors as well. But rarely happens to anything that's sort of a value 5 or lighter.
Yeah, I'm working on a still life right now, and it's all sunken in. Like, it's sinking in pretty bad. So it happens to all of us.
I'm having a tough time.
Mustafa Mahmood says, every time Louis Beard grows, I think he is a new artist joining.
Who said that?
Mustafa.
Mustafa, yeah. It's getting long, isn't it, man? Trying to get it ready for a self-portrait, and you kind of have to go through like the awkward stage before you can like get through, get to where you want it to be. But yes, it's getting rather burly.
Christopher Barakla says, I'm hoping to come to the States to see the unveiling of the WW1 memorial that's in a few years, so I'm hoping to come over sooner. Would love to meet you guys.
Well, I can promise you I will do everything in my power to be there at that World War I memorial. One of my dear friends is actually on that project, Charlie Musto, and we actually had him here to do a live stream with us, or actually he did a tutorial workshop on how to sculpt the portrait. So really hoping to go to that. So you'll probably see us there.
And J. Kamisi Case D says, question for everyone, what are your opinions about copying from the old artists like Velasquez or Vermeer?
Take it away, Alex.
Copying. Yeah, do it. That sounds great. Copy them to figure out what, like, their techniques, color harmony, composition, all that, and then you can also get good ideas for paintings from them.
Yeah. I agree. I think you should totally take any opportunity, if you find that you have the time, to copy the old masters. You'll learn so much. Kristen Yen, who was one of our artists in residence who just left, she did one of a sketch of William Bouguereau, a portrait of his that he did. And I think she was saying one of the nights that we were here that was one of her favorite things that she painted while she was here. She just felt like there was no angst in trying to get anything right. She was learning a whole lot through that process. She tried to use his color palette. So it was just I think it was a beautiful time for her. So I would highly recommend trying that out. Tell you, I'm out of practice talking and painting. Tell you, you don't do it for a couple of weeks and you start getting rusty.
So Alex, what are you working on at the moment?
I am working on a still life for my show. Solo show at Arcadia in November. And I'll probably have one or two still lifes, but mostly figurative stuff, so I'm kind of just in a little on a little still life kick right now. And I won't say exactly what I'm painting. You'll have to come and see.
You have to come see. But it's awesome.
I'm struggling hard.
I get the inside scoop and get to go check out all the stuff. Perks of the job.
And Louie, what about you?
I just finished a commission. Right now I'm kind of in a commission hole. So I've got to work myself out of that. But my next passion project is probably a self-portrait. And then after that I have like 3 or 4 other projects I'd love to do. And I'm just right now making sure that I'm get caught up on my commitments first. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
So a really interesting question just came in from Josh Cruz. Thoughts on Nikolai Samori on his approach with art? I guess more the anti-art kind of movement. Do you agree or disagree with this kind of approach? And do you guys know who that is?
I do, yeah.
Is Nikolai, he's not the one that came here, is it?
Mm-mm.
That's Nicholas Uribe?
Nicholas Uribe.
Uribe, yeah.
Pull it up.
He kind of, it's almost like he's doing what looks like master copies
Mm-hmm.
of like paintings like Ribera and like and basically kind of like destroying them.
Oh, okay. Yep. Well, that's a good. What are our thoughts on his approach?
Yeah, do you think, what is the approach with us? I guess more the anti-art kind of movement. Do you agree or disagree with this approach?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, I'm not one to necessarily focus on whether I agree too heavily or disagree with a particular movement. I have my own opinions for sure, but my own opinions matter to, I guess, what my taste is. I don't have much taste for that kind of art. I wouldn't want it on my wall, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of stuff that I still feel like, is of the art world and has a place in the art world, but isn't necessarily the field that I enjoy. So that being said, I think that do I think that his form is a form of art? Well, I think it is, but I don't know, because it's a form that's trying to make a particular statement. But do I feel like it's good or not good? I don't enjoy it personally, but that doesn't mean, it might not be that he's after people enjoying it. He might be after trying to make a statement that is far from that. So so I'm not opposed to him making statements, I guess is my take on it. But it's just not a statement that I think is worthwhile for me and where I'm going with my work or what I enjoy seeing. So
yeah, for me, I guess, when I see something like that, it's like a bit of a shame because, he has better, he has a lot of technical ability that, I'm striving for, but then decides to take something old and then just kind of tear it apart and there is a lot of cool things about it, but I see it almost as like almost album artwork. Like it would be an awesome album cover. But, and it does have a kind of dark emotional quality to it. But once you start taking like a certain human element out of it, it's just harder to connect to emotionally. And I think that Odd said, because someone, I think while we were there, asked Odd Nerdrum what he thought about him. And he said something like, I think that he even copied one of Odd's paintings. And like did something to it. And yes, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, yeah, it's hard to answer. I kind of think about it in like the sense of like a movie. It's like, what kind of movie would that be? Like like a kind of distorted movie. It's yeah. But then again, I can think of some distorted kind of abstract-y soundscape type music that I really enjoy. And if I compare it to something like that, I can almost, understand it. But yeah, I wish he would take his skill and do something like a narrative or something. I don't know.
It is an intriguing thing because when you look at his paintings, he definitely can paint. Like he's really technically good.
Yeah.
It was a good question.
Yeah, it was a great question. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, everybody. Just thinking back about like first time we were doing this, and I couldn't stop humming because I keep forgetting that the camera's rolling.
Well, a few things. Vincent Torres says, I'm actually working on a gallery large piece, but I will definitely join you guys soon with one of your portraits reference. Love to paint while watching you guys paint and talk.
Oh, awesome.
Do you like the UFC or boxing? And if yes, what are your opinions on Logan Paul versus Mayweather?
Well, I will say it's been a very long time since I've watched much boxing because I've just been trying to focus so heavily on this. But I enjoy it at times when I'm with.
Could you turn your head a little bit that way? Is that?
I had such little down that I don't even know.
Okay.
Did you look through the corners to see?
Yep.
Okay. How you feeling? Shifted your. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was about to say I'm at such a a nebulous stage that it really doesn't matter at the moment.
Question. So, Adriana Solis says, hello friends, Lily's fine art here. Painting alone at my house is better with you. And then she also said, is that Alex Venezia? Oh my god. And then she said, hi from Mexico. She's the same person.
That's awesome.
Oh my god.
It's me.
That's great.
I'm gonna disappoint
That's Alex
you.
Venezia? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What was her name?
Her name was Adriana Solis.
Adriana. I feel like I've heard that name before.
She's from Mexico. And Josh Cruz says, thank you kindly for those wonderful answers. I think you answered one of his questions before. And Alex Tabet, who I remember from last time, says hello from Los Angeles. Terry Feely says hi from Texas. And we also have a question from C. McQueen. I struggle with thinking of what to paint, wasting a lot of time. Any tips on getting through this artist block? I mainly paint still life and also plein air. Thanks, Karina from New Zealand.
Yeah, what to paint is really hard.
And not wasting time too.
I remember before I knew what to paint, I would just do still lifes of like painting stuff because I just loved painting, but I had no idea what I wanted to paint. So it was like palette and brushes.
That's great.
Because that's, I mean, literally what I was so interested in, like at the moment. But yeah, it's really hard. I think for a while you like sort of copy what your favorite painters are painting, and then you start to get a feel for what you actually like. Because I know I was doing, when I first started, it was like still lives that looked like Richard Schmid setups and figures that looked like Jeremy Lipking's setups and flowers that looked like Michael Klein setups. And eventually you figure out your own taste.
Figure out your own setup.
Yep.
Louis, actually, I was thinking about this the other day. Who is like your like two like if you could pick two painters and you're just like yes, like who were they for you? I don't know, that's a classic question, but I was curious.
If I would just pick two.
Yeah, like just yeah.
Well, I would say man, just two. I mean, I guess the ones that like immediately come to mind are, and it changes, it shifts over time. There's like years where I'll look at somebody for a long time, and then there'll be other times where I'll look at somebody else. And so, so that being said, it depends on the year, but overall, people that I continue to go back to is obviously dead people would be like Rembrandt and gosh, in that same vein, probably Vermeer, but I also like love like Andrew Wyeth and American painters like Andrew Wyeth and Winslow Homer. So it's kind of like almost I have to like divide it up into categories of like different people. You know, like my Dutch painters would probably be Rembrandt and Vermeer, but then our American probably Homer and Wyeth, and then you know, landscape, I'd probably say like, Beardstadt was pretty epic, and so, but people I've been looking at a lot more lately is like George Clausen and Friant, and I feel like I discover people all the time, but I love Thayer's work, even though I don't paint anything like him. Mancini's somebody I've been like looking at for about the past 4 or 5 months. Gosh, I love, he's so different than I am, but I love his style. So is that, you're good enough too? 20 versus the 2. So, but yeah. Those are some of the people that come to mind. It's a good question, though.
So Adriana Solis says, what kind of painting or drawing exercises do you recommend for children between 8 to 11 years old? Thanks a lot.
8 to 11.
Well, I would first say what things that actually interest them. Oftentimes it's like superheroes, and you can actually learn a lot about anatomy and drawing by painting Spider-Man and, you know, Thor. So you can learn a lot, and there's a lot of information about that kind of stuff out there. So what I find in 8 to 11-year-old kids, that is what they're interested in, you know. So, but I would say just get them interested in art in general, like taking them to museums and having them copy stuff. That's how I got into it. I just was like, I want to copy drawings. Had somebody tell me to do that, and that I should just go and copy drawings. And because he was like, I don't want to give you any education. I think you should go just draw other drawings that you like. And that's exactly what I did for the first little while. So, and I think that was great advice.
Yeah, if you can get them interested in copying stuff, whatever it is, that's just really going to train their eye. I wish I copied stuff when I was younger. I just made up random stuff.
You can learn a lot by copying at that age.
So, Mustafa Mahmood says, what do you call the art movement or school you were doing?
Or school?
Like school of thought, maybe.
Honestly, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but you know, because I mean, like the school of thought of what I'm doing right now, like as I'm painting.
Yeah, the art movement or school you were doing.
You are doing or were doing?
You are doing.
So, okay, what I'm doing right now. Well, I think that the school of thought of how I'm approaching this particular thing, and what I like to do while we're doing these live streams is do things that I find that I can learn something from. So, so my school of thought here is that I'm just starting with large shapes, but I'm using shadow shapes to start finding them. And then also kind of comparing that with some of the anatomy shapes as well, and trying to use both of those to investigate, and then confirming with very basic comparative measurement is kind of my approach today. So, but I like to use this as opportunities to just try new things.
Let's see. Jasper Dargoff says, did you guys study at an atelier? I am thinking starting to study in my late 20s, but feel like I would be the oldest person at the atelier.
Oh, don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
I did study in Atelier. I studied at Grand Central. And it's funny because even in the interview process, they were like, you're too old. But I found out quickly that was just a way they kind of weeded you out. They would just find whatever the weak point was and then try to tell you that you couldn't do it. And they just wanted to make sure you had enough tenacity to stay and be able to bear through the whole process. So I was 32 when I went to an atelier. I had been painting for years, so I did have that under my belt, and that was very helpful because I had been painting for about 12 years full time. But it is never too late to continue your training. So if you have the resources, you have the time, definitely.
And then it asked, I guess, if we went to an atelier. I did not, but my drawing skills would be a lot better if I did. So, yeah. If if you can, do it. Just make sure you like the work at the place you're going to.
Mm.
Or at least you can see how you can make it useful for you. Because I remember when I first started thinking about becoming an artist and thinking about going to an atelier, it was almost like, well, whatever one's in Italy seems the coolest and must be the best because it's in Italy. And like whatever had the like coolest name also that made it seem like it was going to teach me all the secrets. Yeah, it's like, but in reality, it's the work.
Yep. Florence Academy was at the top of my list for the same reason, but I was about to get married, and I knew that that was kind of off the table because it was going to be too expensive, and my wife was training to be a dental hygienist, and well, that wouldn't transfer over, you know. So, so that was the first thing that, like hurdle or decision that made me go, no, we're not going to do that. Incominanti was one of the programs that I looked at because I knew of Nelson Shank's work, and I knew he had founded the school, but then found out that he didn't really teach there anymore. He was more of just the figurehead of the program. And I also was starting to look at the work, and I saw Grand Central as well as a few others, and basically I was just like, at the end of the day, there was something about Grand Central's work that I just absolutely loved. And I couldn't figure out what it was. But I was like, I felt like there was something solid about the work. And I hadn't seen that in other places. And then there are several people I started following that were teaching there that I loved their work. And I was like, I've got to go there. And New York was cool. And that was part of the draw, that Philly just didn't sound as cool either as New York was. And I think my wife appreciates that because she loved being in New York.
You would have been painting a lot different if you went to Incominati.
I would be very differently. It's amazing like what those differences in like the trajectory of your life, what trajectories they make for you.
So, J. Kamika SED, do you like Kim Jong-gi? He was popular like 2 years ago and now nobody talks about him, but it was very cool to see him draw from memory.
Mm-hmm.
Is he that illustrator that draws like those massive drawings that he starts in one little spot and then draws this incredible thing from his mind?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
No, I think he's insane. That is pretty darn cool. You know, and that's the other thing is like you need to learn to paint the way or draw or do whatever it is the way you want to do it, because the art market is fickle. One day you'll be hot and the other day it won't be, like you won't be the thing, and that's okay. As long as you love what you're doing and it's sustained, you will always have a following. And I guarantee he's doing just fine, even though he might not be like at the top of the charts anymore. But I do think what he does is pretty incredible, because I've watched him do, you know, on like a time lapse, do his thing, and the amount of like overlapping and things that he's thinking about throughout the whole process is a bit mind blowing, you know.
So, Vicky Sullivan says, hi from the Mornington Peninsula in Australia. And I just wanted to add that I have been there and it's a really beautiful place. And they have really beautiful hot springs where she is.
Sounds like y'all need to pay her a visit when you go.
Yeah.
So whenever the day comes that y'all return back to Divya's homeland,
Yeah. says, good books on painting the human figure. I know there's lots on drawing, but not so much on painting.
Like painting the human figure instead of drawing the human figure.
Richard Schmidt has that old
Yeah.
painting the figure book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it good? I know you have it. I haven't read it.
Well, I got it like somewhat recently, so I haven't like read it as like an instructional book.
Mm-hmm.
I've just kind of looked at all the pictures so far, so I can't say it's the best to teach you because I don't know. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I feel like to paint, you learn to paint, and then it's like learning to draw the figure, and then paint it. I don't know. So I actually don't know, but that's the only one I know. So yeah, Richard Schmid, painting the figure.
Actually, I'm with Alex on this. I don't have a good recommendation because most of what I've learned in painting the figure was in my training at the Atelier. So I wish I was more help, my friend, on that one. But it also says that, hey, there's a gap. I need to find a good resource for people on that. So let me get back at you on that.
There is going to be a video about painting the figure.
That is so true, Alex. So later this month, I think it's June 26th, we'll be releasing Painting the Figure by Mackenzie Swenson, who is a phenomenal figurative artist. And she teaches figure at Grand Central Atelier in New York City. And she was in the same class that I was in. And so she came down and painted a figure, and we recorded the whole thing, and I've been editing it for the past several months to get it ready for all of you. And that will be available on our subscription platform at East Oak Studio. If you want more, it's also Atelier Live is the name of our subscription platform. And if you just want to get on our email list, that'll be in the link in the details in the description below. And so we will be not only doing that, but we'll be releasing a drawing the figure by Lynn Clark, who is also a figure drawing instructor at Grand Central. And he's also a phenomenal draftsman. So stay tuned for that. That will be released a little later this year. So
I'm excited to see that one, actually.
yeah, both of them are incredibly talented. So really looking forward to it.
So Johnny Asher says, how many paintings does one need for a solo show?
18 to 20. That's how many I have to do. But that probably just varies depending on your gallery's size. But yeah, I have to do like 18 to 20, which is a lot of painting.
They're awesome though. As the collection grows here, it's kind of sad when the day comes when they have to leave. You know, because I don't know, you get kind of attached to seeing them. They kind of feel like a part of the spirit of East Oaks, and then you have to like see them all go. Alex is so excited about seeing them go, I'm sure, because that means they're going into beautiful homes, and you know, as the creator of them, I'm sure he's sick at looking at them, but we're not. We love them.
Yeah, I just want to like finish the 20 so that I can go back and fix all of them. Because I just like, for staring at them for so long, there's so much I want to fix. the time.
for the model.
All right. We will be back shortly, and looking forward to actually putting some color down on this painting.
She's not around anymore.
Existent anymore, and also they left their people, and they like went bankrupt and then left people in Iceland.
No.
Fly them back.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Sorry, your flight no longer exists. Wow, that kind of stinks.
Oh.
What?
Mhm. I'm looking at the.
Oh yeah, you let him set it.
That looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all wrong, man. I thought that. Why did you set? No, I was kidding.
No,
Everybody's got to keep me in line here. Can be a bit of a jokester sometimes.
So Vicky Sullivan also asked how the artist resident works, but I feel like you touched on that a bit before.
Yeah, it basically, we just have a couple of different tiers. We only offer it to about 3 people at any given time. And it's usually artists who have already been trained, because what we find is that there's kind of a gap that needs to be bridged between them being trained and then actually kind of practicing it as a career. They don't teach you how to start an LLC or get a bank account or a sole proprietor, or how to do your taxes or how to talk to galleries or any of that kind of stuff. So kind of like, we're here to help offer and answer questions and be present to people who are trying to get their career started, and also help them in their field of what they're wanting to paint, and try to help guide them to figuring out what it is they want to paint. So,
Am I supposed to have an LLC?
no.
Okay.
I would not say it at your stage. That, by the way, that's one of the first advices. You don't need an LLC. All you need is a sole proprietorship. As long as you have a social security number, you're good. Some people are like, well, you need to protect yourself. But protect yourself from what? There's hardly any liability to an artist unless people start licking the lead off of your painting and then sue you for it. So.
You didn't put "don't lick."
Yeah, exactly. You didn't put "don't lick" on the warning label.
So Jasper Dargov says, did you find GCA difficult even though you had already painted for 12 years?
Yes, definitely. I was learning something that I'd never learned before, which was powerful. I mean, that was the reason I went. I wanted to stretch myself. But I never understood the concept of form painting or form modeling, which is a big part of that program. And I find that there are other things that just the cross-pollination of ideas, even concepts, ideologies, philosophies, or even something that I was, heavily influenced by. Some I took, some I still was like, no, that's not necessarily what I believe or agree to, but it's just kind of covers the gambit of all sorts of different ways of thinking and schools of thought. So yes, it was amazing as far as that's concerned.
Louis, were there certain habits you had to break? Do you remember any specifics when you were from back to then going into GCA?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely one of the things that I felt like I had to break is understanding color harmony outside of the program, because they didn't really teach you much about color harmony. So you're just kind of painting as you see and trying to paint sort of like a solid thing, and the tendency to make your painting feel a bit gray because color harmony wasn't taught very well there. That was something I had to learn on my own, and so that's something I feel like I had to definitely figure out. But yeah, trying to think if there's, I'm sure there's many, but I think it was not necessarily things I had to unlearn, but things that I had to learn that wasn't necessarily taught there, that I ended up learning on my own, just with my own study.
What about from painting by yourself for those 10, 12 years to then going to GCA, like having to...
Oh, unlearn from that.
Yeah.
Definitely. You have to learn to see a different way. And so there's a few old habits you had to break. It's not as many as I thought I would have to break. Just because a lot of things would translate over, and all you had to do is tweak from where you were. But I think it's more of like, there's a lot of things I had to learn, period, versus just unlearn.
So Alex Tabbitt says, I absolutely love the skin color variations y'all have in your portraits. I'm curious if you guys sometimes either play those up or add them in for an increased effect, or is it purely observed?
It is definitely not all observed. But then again, it's like, if there was nothing there to observe, like, it would look a lot different. So you're going off of what you're seeing, but I am playing certain things up and keying certain things down. And yeah, not being so... I feel like I used to try and be a lot more truthful to what I was seeing. And now I'm thinking almost a bit more conceptually about what a skin tone actually is, where before it's like, oh, that's like a gray, like slightly red-gray part there, and that's slightly just like a mosaic of all these different colors that didn't really look like skin tones. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I do play up certain like warm moments and cold moments and stuff like that.
Like the nose being red in the ear and stuff like that?
No, don't give away all my secrets.
Mm.
Yeah, stuff like that. Nobody else knows that but me.
That's a pure Alex secret. Nobody's heard the yellow forehead, red cheeks, and greenish chin. No, I would say the same. I think that Alex definitely cracked more of a code for his work on trying to find his own color way faster than I have. In fact, I would say that a lot of his work inspired me to push more of the harmonizing effects of color versus the observation of what I'm seeing. I have just the side of me. I love what Carmen Gordon says a lot, which is she talks about the German in her doesn't allow her to do certain things because she's like so meticulous. You know, I have a bit of German in me, so I start taking that and saying, "Can I borrow your palette knife?" Mm-hmm. The German in me doesn't allow me to like want to stray too far away from what the truth that I see in real life, or like the true color. Anyway, all that to be said is I have started utilizing like the idea of that color harmony by saying, okay, there's these beautiful chords like you have in like a piano, where these three notes actually just go really well together, and then trying to take that idea and push it where I use what I'm observing and say, okay, well, is this warmer or cooler? And then just do that within the color harmony of the piece. So, so yeah, I would say I attempt to not paint necessarily as true from life, but to actually find chords that work really beautifully together. But I will say that's very difficult for me. My nature is to want to paint exactly what I'm seeing and try to get exactly the color that I see in front of me onto the page. So
yeah, I'll also say it's like painting from life also has a lot more good stuff like going on than painting from a photo. So it's also kind of trying to like tap into like just the color relationships that you see in life when you're like painting from a photograph. So I'm also kind of changing things because I know if I just copied the photograph, it would just feel like a photograph.
mm.
And a lot of that has to do with just like, yeah, color balance to make it feel like it has life to it.
And I will say for me, sometimes I actually have to manipulate the photograph a touch more so that I can like see it. You know, I think that sometimes it just takes time to be able to see the thing that you're wanting to create or harmonize. I think Alex just does a better job of just being like, okay, here's my notes. This is what I'm going to use.
No, I have plenty of my fair share of spending too long on Photoshop, like just trying to make the reference look like a painting before I even paint it.
So, the better third says, I'm above 50, old as stone, but as Cesar Santos told me, I work very, very hard and use whatever life's experiences gave me to make up for starting young.
There you go.
Damn right.
Oh, old as stone. Well, you're still a Rolling Stone, though. And they're still going, so. Just keep moving. Don't gather any moss. You'll be fine. Love it.
So, Josh Crew says, do you paint every day? If so, how many hours and breaks?
Well, I paint pretty much 5 days a week.
Yeah, every work day you paint, for
Yeah.
sure.
And then usually like 9 hours, because like 9 or 10 hours, because I usually start at 9 and then stop for dinner. So, yeah. Very fun. Inspiring. And I try and listen to myself and actually take breaks though. Like you'll find me like sitting out in the backyard just blasting myself with sun just so I can like wake myself up or just take a break.
Yeah, very important, and do a good job of that. I wish I could paint every day, but of course, even painting every day can like sometimes feel miserable because doing anything, your job could be sleep every day, and you would get tired of it, you know. So so it doesn't really matter. I think I wish I could have the option to be that disciplined, but I do know myself. I think sustainability-wise, it would be best if I probably didn't. But I'm forced not to at the moment because I I own East Oaks and run East Oaks, and that requires a lot of energy and time and care to make sure that we can do these things for y'all. And I love it. And so I think it's its own form of balance, but because of that responsibility and the responsibility to my commission work, don't necessarily get to paint everything I want to paint, but I paint probably, on average, I probably paint 3 days a week, 4 days a week, maybe. So, but I wish I could paint 5 days a week.
Yeah, if it wasn't for, if you only had portraits to do, you would probably paint 5 days a week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. It's not because of a lack of not doing. It's a lack of probably doing too much, or it's a matter of me just doing too much and probably overextending myself just a touch.
So a few questions have come in. Have you guys read Oil Painting and Drawing as Associated from Solomon J. Solomon? I read it a long time ago, and in the beginning it was great, but when I end to read it, I end up confused.
I have like read parts of it multiple times, and then recently like forced myself to read it all the way through. And like I've had it almost ever since like quite like in the beginning of when I started painting, and I'm sure if I read it right now I'd probably understand something different than when I read it like years ago. But yeah, there's like certain times when your brain is like ready to understand what the book is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're just not ready for a certain part. Like for so many years, I mean, I read this stuff, but I mean, it didn't necessarily click. And I feel like reading it recently, I feel like I understand most of it, but there's still tons of just stuff like when he talks about other painting schools, just like the terminology is kind of lost on me. For the longest time I had no idea what he meant by looking glass. I was like, what is this looking glass? It must be some secret thing. Yeah, it was a mirror. I like looked up like artist looking glass like device like and now it's like you just read the context, it's like, oh yeah, he's obviously talking about a mirror.
That's awesome.
What did he say about the mirror?
Just to constantly check your work in a mirror. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great book.
That's awesome. That's a great story, man.
So
No, man, not at all.
Miguel Martinez says, greetings from California. Love to see you guys painting, and I enjoy the conversations. Thanks for inspiring and motivating us to get painting too.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
And Johnny Asher says, what I learned from my mentor was that academic painters tend to change colors, like the rosy cheeks, etc., while an impressionist, like a Boston school painter, paints what they see as it is.
Interesting. Yes, I mean, that is to some degree true. I think there's more to unpack in that idea, but that on the surface and at its most basic form is true. Because what an academic painter is trying to do versus an impressionistic painter is an impressionistic painter is trying to paint optically. They're trying to see exactly what they see and give the impression of that on paint. But paint is limited. You can't do the exact color because paint doesn't emit light. So you paint exactly what you think you can in order to make that color feel like the impression that you're receiving from the thing in front of you. Whereas an academic painter, or I would say more of a form conceptualized painter, is one who is trying to use illusion of a particular format that happens with your eye and use it to the advantage and change things in order for the limitations of the paint to actually be maximized so that it shows a solid nature to it. And it's not necessarily academic, but it's more of the idea of conceptualized form where you're actually trying to create. It's kind of like the difference between like regular animation and computer animation. Computer animation is using exactly those concepts of illusion to actually make the thing feel more three-dimensional. And so we are typically trying to do that same thing where we're trying to like actually create this thing in sort of this like format of space past the picture plane versus using the picture plane to give the impression of what we perceive just with our eyes. But our eyes can fool us. So things like simultaneous contrast, which are like these scientific phenomena that happen in your eye, allow for us to not fully grasp what we're seeing correctly. The first thing I think about is like the dress. Is it gold, blue and yellow, or is it black and blue, or is it white and gold? And when that came out, that was like a huge thing, you know. And it's because our eyes are actually trying to register what we see in a particular way, and some people see it differently than others. So you get an impressionist painter, you get one person painting it as a white and gold dress, and then you get another impressionist painter painting it as a black and blue dress. Versus like an academic painter or a form painter who's like, okay, I'm going to go look at the exact dress, see what it is, and then paint it accordingly.
Yeah, what color is the dress? Okay.
And then try to, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I was just vibing.
Yeah, do it, man, do it.
What you were saying.
Add
man.
add in.
But I know when I was first learning optically, like more impressionistic, I was truly convinced that I could paint exactly what I saw.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
exact. But
Is that the timer?
Yeah, just like.
All right. Complete that thought on the next turn.
Yes.
Alex Tabbitt says, hey Lewis, at the end of your portrait painting tutorial, you showed a beautiful sepia-toned portrait drawing. I love it so much, and I'm curious what kind of materials / process you used to tone it.
A sepia-toned drawing at the end of my portrait tutorial? I'm trying to figure out which that was. So it was a drawing, you said?
It's been like 2 years since
I've done that, or 3 years, so it's been a
Well,
while.
I probably used Fabriano Artistica paper if it was a drawing. And let's see, I probably used some sort of Conte if it was more of a sepia style. But I'm drawing a blank on the actual piece that that you recall. So maybe you can clarify what it was of, and then I can help you with it more. But typically, I'll tone it to be in like a sepia format, and then put charcoal. Use charcoal. It might have been one of those. So, but if you describe it a little bit more, I'll be able to happily help you know what it is.
All right, let's see. Christopher Barraclow says, truly appreciate what you do for us. And Eastokes, Lewis, your time isn't going to waste. Can't find the words to tell you the level of gratitude and respect I have for you and the team.
Yeah, that's nice.
I'm so honored, man. Hopefully we'll be here for y'all for a very long time. It's truly a dream of mine. You know, I was sitting alone, painting by myself, feeling like there was no community in the world about 7 years ago, or 8 years ago. And then I discovered that there was a much greater world, and I just realized, well, I don't want anyone else to feel the way I felt, just like an island and isolated. So how can we make that happen? So to hear that you appreciate it, man, that means a lot to me. Thank you. That'll put fuel in my tank for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
You were just saying how beautiful Rothka's skin is. So, it's got such a rich color.
Oh yeah, which I don't think is very important, but what I was saying before.
Oh yeah,
the live stream
was important.
In case someone is like, is he ever going to bring it back up?
Yes.
Was that I thought that I could copy exactly what I was seeing. I remember arguing with my mom's boyfriend at the time. Quite a few years ago. I'm like, no, I promise you I can mix the exact color that if you checked it, it would be just perfect. The whole thing, I could do it. And he painted cars, not people. But
So he had experience, at least, in painting something.
yeah, like some color context. And I think he's right.
Hopefully he's not listening tonight, though, and he doesn't know it. Right?
He'd probably be happy that I referenced him.
We have a question from Josh Cruz, who asks, do you need to know how to draw to paint?
Oh, man. Well, anybody can put a brush up there with pigment on it, so I guess you don't need to learn how to draw to paint. But if you want to paint well and you want to paint people or paint things accurately, you've got to know how to draw. And it is an absolute must.
Yeah.
There's just no substitution, in my opinion, to learning how to paint. Just because of how important, especially in the world of portraiture, your sole goal, if you do it as commission work, not necessarily if you're doing it as figurative work for like a gallery. It doesn't matter if you get the exact likeness of the person as long as it looks real. But as a portrait painter, your sole goal is to make it look like the person. And you cannot accomplish that unless you understand drawing. So, and it's the fastest way to learn to paint well, in my opinion. So, some people feel like if they want to cut corners to find a better way, an easier way to like learn how to do the thing, you know, this whole painting thing, because painting's cool, but drawing kind of is boring. No, there's no way to like learn how to do it faster than it is to just spend the time, log in the hours of learning how to draw.
Yeah, I'll say since I didn't go to an atelier, I was very much like, let's skip straight to doing a finished artful painting, and just relied more on my like intuitive ability to draw and like kind of learn to draw as I did each painting, like the beginning stages. But man, I wish I just took some time and just learned how to draw really well. And honestly, after my show's over, I plan on like doing some intensive just drawing study, because it just would make my painting so much better. And quality of life while painting better. Not always struggling with the drawing.
Yeah, I believe it was the French neoclassical painter. I guess it's pronounced like Ingres, or however you, Ingres. I don't actually know how to pronounce it. But he says something along the lines of, it takes 30 years to become a master at drawing and only 3 more days to become a master at painting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Yep.
I'm gonna store that one in the memory banks.
Yeah, I've heard his name as Ingres, but I'm sure that's wrong.
Yeah, that's what I assumed it was, but like then I was thinking, oh man, I bet it's French. So I did have to look it up first to be like, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And the Wikipedia says it's Ingres, which I mean makes sense, you know, that checks out as the French pronunciation, but maybe, you know, if other people are talking about him, you'll hear Ingres.
He's like super form painter, like just really solid.
Yeah, I think
smooth
so.
Form.
Yeah, that's him.
That's good stuff.
I think I've said it before, speaking of quotes from awesome people who know how to draw well, the Repin quote comes to mind, which he's like, first you paint tight and bad, then you paint, or wait, was it first you paint loose and bad, or is it first? This is, I'm getting into that category where the joke like is lost after like I start thinking about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's first you paint tight and bad, and then you paint loose and bad, then you paint tight and good, and only then can you paint loose and good. I'll have to look it up exactly and make sure that was right, but something along those lines.
Well, that's true. I mean, I love a lot of their work, but a lot of people that I see studying with Odd Nerdrum, they go there and they just start painting like Odd Nerdrum paints now. But even, it's just like, but if you go back to like the 80s and before, how Odd used to paint, it was just so much like tighter, and that's why he can just tear a painting apart now. But everyone just goes in there and just starts sanding their paintings, and doesn't it? Yeah. It's just, and it doesn't look good.
True.
All right, we have a question from Gail. She says, how do you decide the background color? I don't know if just in this case or in general, because I guess we do have a background color, but I know sometimes some artists will change that.
Well, Alex, you have a thought on that one, bud?
Well, in this case, I'm kind of just sort of copying what I'm seeing, but what I have is not really what I'm seeing. What I have is more gray, but I actually like that it's more green back there. I just couldn't seem to bother to make it accurate. And I first put it down and then put the skin tone and realized it needs to get a lot darker. Anyway, how do I decide? This time I decided just because it's what's there and it looks really nice next to her skin tone. And maybe if I didn't like the way it looked, I would have changed it. But usually you try different things when you have the model. It's pretty hard for me to like change it up like afterwards and just pick a background after I've painted ahead or something. It usually has to all kind of work in context with each other. Because there has been times where I've done a whole painting, like a whole like portrait or something, and then I go to put the background in, and now I have to make the background fit the portrait, and I end up just having to change it so much, and so, yeah. I don't know if that really answers it, but
I know, I think it does. And I mean, background stuff is, it's like that's a whole nother ball of wax, you know, like when you're thinking about stuff, because people make up the thing, but I think the hardest part of making it up is exactly what Alex is talking about, which is making it work and harmonize with what you already have down, because there's some level of when you're painting everything together that kind of it's all mixing on your palette, and because it's mixing on your palette, it sort of creates a natural harmony with your work. And when you do it separate from that, you almost have to regain the understanding of that harmony before it feels like it's going to work. So,
yeah.
Could you maybe elaborate on, like, Alex, you were saying, like, that there was the time that you did the portrait, and then you had to wait until the very end to do the background, and then you had to make a background that fit the portrait. Could you maybe elaborate on what exactly you mean by a background that fits the portrait? Like what kinds of things you're looking at or looking for?
Yeah, let me think, like, what happens. It's like I think a lot of it also has to do with value, because I'll kind of sketch in a background and then I'll paint a whole portrait and then go to put the background color, the actual color it should be. And then everything in my portrait didn't like go deep enough, so now I'm like having to try and paint the background lighter than what I'm seeing it so it fits the original portrait, because you'll put something, or you'll put a color down and realize it changes your skin tones. Everything that you thought your skin tones were now just looks completely different because you put a chromatic note in the background that then makes your person look gray, or vice versa. You put something really gray in the background and your person's glowing orange. And then you have to kind of neutralize or pump up chroma or tone down value, and then it's also hard because you're judging your picture just based on just the picture, not because a lot of what we do is based on what we're looking at, copying like what we're seeing, but then it just becomes what fits the painting. Yeah, it's hard.
all in all, if you haven't noticed, the real answer to all of these questions is painting's hard. It's funny, I think when people first get started, they're like, oh, how hard can it be? And then they just like start diving down the rabbit hole and they're like, oh. Yeah. So oftentimes we're talking to the artists that are here, and you know, like this part's just so tough. And it's kind of like the optimistic side of me is like, you know, though, if it wasn't tough, it wouldn't be worthwhile doing. And the reason we're doing this is because of the fact that there's beauty in the challenge. And so I don't know how encouraging it is in the moment, because if you're frustrated, nothing feels very encouraging. But I think that the truth is solid there.
Yeah, if it was so easy, I mean, there'd be a lot more painters as well.
Yep.
A lot more really good painters.
And the funny thing, this is such a great point, because the other side to that is like, you know, say for example, you know, photographers. There's a certain level of entry. It's kind of one of those things that's like easy to learn, hard to master. Where it's people are like, well, I you know, can point and shoot, and I can click a button. But the level at which is required to make it even better, like the bar gets raised because everybody can kind of do click a button to make the photo. So now you got to think about context, composition, lighting, you know, light ratio, mood, color harmony, or color coding, you know, whatever you want to call it. And you know, our model is a photographer, and I'm sure she can relate to all of these things. You know, and then identity. Identity is like probably one of the harder things that you would have to accomplish in your work, because you know, here we can like change brushstrokes or use particular colors, or you know, but you have to like find your own voice in that world too, and that's hard, especially when there's more and more and more people out there who have access or are trying to do it. So we might need to hear from our model soon to see what her thoughts are in that world.
Wait, can I talk to you?
How about we do this on the next break?
Great.
As soon as we break, I would love to hear your thoughts of it, because I bet we're getting close.
Yeah.
And we can use some of that time, and you can, you know, hang out and just we'll hear your thoughts. But you'll have to go over and talk into the mic, because no one else will hear you. But no, I'd love to hear that.
Somebody is asking, is there a reason Lewis is using a fan brush to do the eyes? Is he not using a fine brush because it might look too tight? Although maybe she's talking about Alex, because I think Alex is using a fan brush. Unless, Lewis, are you using a fan brush?
I am, but at the moment I'm using a flat brush, but I was using a fan brush a second ago. In fact, this is interesting, because I was talking to Nick earlier about this very thing, which is sometimes for the purpose of like creating interesting and beautiful mark making, we tend to, the control side of us wants to use the smallest brush for the detailed areas, when in fact sometimes one of the better things you can do for making the painting feel like it's got beautiful marks is to use a larger brush. It'll also force you to keep softer edges, and it'll also force you to be more abbreviated and intentional about the mark that you make. And for all those reasons, I think that it's important to practice that as well. Wow, now that was an loud alarm. But at this break, I would love to hear her thoughts on the photography part of art making, and what her thoughts were on that whole subject matter. Would you repeat the question? And she's going to come over with you and talk.
Let's see. Which question was that? Yeah, does anybody remember what the question was? That
exact question, or if we like kind of got there on our own?
Oh, was that the one about the backgrounds that we were?
Oh, yes. I mean, I have thoughts on backgrounds, but I don't do very many portraits or studio work, so.
guess we were talking about like with painting, you could like just paint differently, apply paint differently, and create your own voice. But with photography, it'd be even harder to create something unique. Oh, because we were talking about if it was easy, everyone would do it. So then it's like, oh,
This is so cool to see. I don't know.
I'm scared here.
I do have the y'all's mics off, so if you did want to say something, I can leave this. You can talk.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know what to say.
So I guess we will be back in just a few minutes.
I don't know what profound comment to make. One off.
All right, there have been a couple questions since the last question, which was asked. So let me go back. Let's see. Oh, okay. So we answered the question about the fan brush. Do you have favorite neutral tones for portrait backgrounds?
Ooh. I don't know if I do. I mean, the neutral mixtures I use a lot are French ultramarine blue and oxide red, transparent oxide red. And I'll shift that with also the same thing with oxide yellow and manganese violet. And both of those kind of create really pretty neutrals that I can shift a lot depending on what I need it for. But I don't know if I have a favorite neutral color in general that I love, but I do happen to have a lot of neutral in my backgrounds typically.
And do you ever shift those neutrals either warmer or cooler based on like the subject, like clothing color or like warmer, cooler skin tones or hair color or whatever?
I would say I tend to make them cooler because I'm usually working with more fair skin. And when I'm working with fair skin, because I key it so light that I'm right at the edge of my like chroma range, and so I use the background to kind of accentuate the color a little bit more. But overall, I think that it's important that your background color balances with whatever your foreground color is. So if you are very fair and it is super, super neutral colors, but you want them to feel warm, then you need to make it a particular cool background to a degree.
You used a term where you said that you were at the was it like the edge of your of your chroma range, I believe. Could you maybe elaborate on what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, so what I mean by chroma range is, so if you think about like when you're on like an app, and a photo app, and it says saturation, saturation basically is the same idea as chroma. Chroma is the intensity of the color that you're working with. So red can only go so red, right? And so if you think about like fire engine red, that is a particular high chroma red color. But the more like gray you add into that color reduces the chroma of it, but doesn't necessarily reduce or change the hue of it. And so you can have the same hue of a color, which is like what you know color to be, like is this blue, is this a purpley blue, or is this a red blue? That's what a hue is. And then you might have a very intense though, like royal blue, which is a particular type of, say, purpley blue. And then you could have like a very gray, like the color of this floor that you cannot see on camera, but is like a very gray, blue-gray. And that would be like a very neutralized version of that same color. So it'd be very low chroma. Whoa, that's not what I meant to do. talk too much. So hopefully that helps kind of answer what I'm trying to say is basically if I'm painting something that's really white or really bright, and like our skin has this like rich, you know, pinky nature or orangey nature to it, I can only go so white where I start losing the ability to get that color powerful and saturated. So since I kind of use all the way up at the white range in my skin tones typically, that means that I actually have to use the background to help sort of complement the color of the person in order for it to feel like there's more color there. It's sort of an illusion.
All right, let's see. How much abstraction in the signs of brushstrokes contribute to the good realization of a painting? I'm not quite sure what if realization means just realizations in making the painting in general, or if that's about making it look real. But yeah, what about the how do the abstract parts of the brushstrokes affect that?
Take it away, Alex.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we were talking about Ingress. I already forgot how you said his name is actually pronounced. But there's certain painters where you just can't even see a brushstroke. Like, it's just so smooth, like it looks like a marble sculpture or something. And that can be done so extremely well. And then there's certain paintings that it's just every brushstroke seems different. You can barely tell how the painting is painted because everything's just hatching together and just so many different brushstrokes, and that also gives this really nice natural feeling. It's kind of just like getting really good at one of them, or at whatever you choose to do. But they can, both ways can get to something very real. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, Nick and I were talking about that earlier, where there's a lot of painters that paint totally different ways and approach it different ways. And yet they're all have their own particular beauty to them. And so, but we were talking about, you know, which direction he should go at the beginning of his painting. And I was like, well, you can go any of those ways, but if you go this way, you got to do this. And if you go that way, you got to do this. But it doesn't matter. You can choose which one you like. And so it really just depends more on what it is that what do you want to be influenced by in your approach. So you can go loose at the beginning or you can go tight at the beginning. That's fine, you know. So then we started talking about being encouraged to look at particular ways different painters paint that you love and want to paint like, so that we can figure out how you should make your approach.
And let's say if you want to be really good at painting loose, what does Reppin say about that? You should first paint tight.
Tight. Also, I think there's a particular truth in doing exactly the opposite of your tendency so that you widen your range of vocabulary in painting. So you might be very good at painting and drawing tight, and therefore I think you should like practice being loose, or you might paint thin, and therefore you should like squeeze out like several tubes of paint and then use the whole tube to paint a painting, you know, to practice the idea of like painting thick and not being afraid of it, and using that as part of the vocabulary in your poetry.
All right. Let's see. Tina Figarelli asks, any tips or advice on writing an artist statement?
I wish I was better at it, I can tell you that.
Make really good paintings and don't write an artist statement.
I like it.
That's
Alex.
my approach.
awesome.
Well, I try anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say when I was in college, you know, you could easily, art was more about how well you could declare your concept and how powerful your artist statement was. But you make a good point that if you paint in a way that is intuitively understood, that is incredibly powerful and beautiful and hard to do, your work can be a statement. But I don't want to be a cop-out to like on the artist statement thing, because I do think that it can be important for vision. To really kind of solidify your own why. I will say this though, it has been a very long time since I have written my artist statement, and probably good for me to readdress it. And I don't know the best route, but I do think there are a few people in our community that would. Alla, she's a great writer and has written for many grants and has probably rewritten her art statement many times. So she would be better equipped for that question.
Yeah, the knowing your why, like I think that's knowing your own artist statement, why you're doing what you're doing, and kind of like your code of this kind of like things you go by. I think, yeah, that's really important, but the traditional sense of an artist statement, yeah, just make good paintings. If I have to read your artist statement to think your art's good, then it's not good. It's like having to like look up what the movie was about after you watched it. It's like, was that a good movie? If I have to like research what I just watched.
Let me read about it, if that was a good movie or not.
Because I've definitely watched a fair share of artsy indie films where I'm just like, well, I gotta look up what that was supposed to mean. Because I have no idea. And I want to know if I just wasted 2 hours of my life.
And I need to read to see if I did.
Yep.
We have a question from Josh Cruz, which he actually asked this one earlier, and I missed it. Ironically, he also said right after sending that last one, thank you for answering all of my questions. So the fact that I missed the question right there, kind of yeah. But he says, how much anatomy have you guys studied?
We're on two different scales of that. Louis knows a lot more.
I've studied a decent amount of anatomy. It's funny, a lot of these questions are literally conversations I've had today with all of y'all. So I was talking to Caroline earlier about this.
Oh yeah.
And I was telling her that if you painted, if your drawing of like shapes and form and understanding of the drawing of shapes and form was perfect, then there's no reason to have to know anatomy, because you are able to conceptualize three-dimensional space so well that it wouldn't really matter. And the beauty of abstract shapes exists without knowing anatomy. But the purpose of knowing good anatomy is as an investigative tool to help you better approach the piece and problem solve quicker, to making the thing feel like there is this hard substance underneath these soft draped substances on top of it, meaning like hard bone with like muscles that literally have a particular way of inserting and coming out of that bone, and then how the skin drapes like a cloth over it. And it helps you find those moments when you really don't feel like you have much context of figuring out what's going on and how something's moving, especially if you're working from a photo. And it's even more so, especially if you're working from like painting a child that has like these super subtle forms that it's hard to tell. Knowing anatomy helps you understand what should be turned back into space when you might have an area that's blown out and you can't really tell. versus what should be coming forward in space, and how quickly should it dip because of like how the quad overlaps, you know, your knee, and like, you know, quadriceps like several muscles, and so how they overlap with each other, you know. On a child, that can be very difficult to see, and you know, it's funny, we intuitively understand how people look and what they look like. So when we see it wrong, we kind of go, oh, so that kind of looks wrong, but I really don't know why. And so you kind of prevent a pitfall from that, and just another arrow in your quiver of investigation.
Yeah, that's another thing I plan on getting a lot better at, is anatomy. Yeah, I was talking about this today too, about how Odd Nerdrum said something about, he always says things very simplified and then you have to dissect it, but how like a person should be painted like bumpy. And it's like, it's what he's talking about is like the anatomy and exactly where things are like bump out and bump in that make it feel so like solid and strong and like a real person, instead of like, you know, painting an arm as just a tube.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just so, yeah. Person should be bumpy.
This is a question that is asked directly to Alex, but you know, maybe Louis, with like, you know, some of your portraits, you know, this may be relevant as well. But this is specifically to Alex. Do you ever feel burned out from making so many paintings for a show? If so, how do you get past it?
Yes, I do. I'm feeling that now. It's definitely like, what happens is you just don't get enough time to experiment, so you kind of have to just change the way you do things. Yeah, anyway, you definitely get burnt out, and I think because I still like am in the very beginning of my like career, I think it's honestly just a really good learning curve of figuring out exactly how much I want to create throughout the year, what I'm capable of, what is my burnout point, and then making sure that I, you know, don't put myself through that again, but also, you know, make the best of my opportunities. But what do I do? For me, like, to not burn out, I have to kind of start going into little rabbit holes of things that interest me about getting better at art. So like if it's anatomy or composition or just learning instead of just creating, it's like, okay, I need to make a painting and then I need to finish the painting. And then I need to make a painting and finish the painting. I need to like explore and re-inspire myself, or else I just burn out. Feel like a human printer.
Yeah, I remember that exact time when you felt that way 2 years ago too, when you were finishing out your series, and you're just like, I'm having a freak out moment because I feel like a human printer.
Yep, and then I took like a 2-month break, and then I was feeling really good. And I was like, sign me up again, I'm ready. And now I've learned, don't do that.
I will say though, I think the scheduled time that you had on your second one has been way better than your first one. I mean, you were literally like pressed for time and just working day and night, and you've been able to do much more of a much better 9 to 5 this time around.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for having to like sell paintings that are not part of my solo show, I would have it would have just been a great amount of time, but now I still feel like I'm kind of, yeah, in that moment where I just have to keep painting nonstop. But the end is in sight,
Yeah.
and I am enjoying it. It's freaking awesome. It's just you asked me if I burn out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because Alex, how your show is like, what is it, November, October, something like that?
November, New York
New
City,
York City.
Soho.
And for context, you've been working for that show for the past like what, year and a half, something like, maybe 2 years.
Trying to think. Yeah, it's been less than 2 years, but maybe more than a year. Definitely more than a year.
Yeah. So when he says that he's been, working a lot in preparation for it, he's been working a long time in preparation for it.
See, he and I literally have exact opposite formats of how our business models. My business model is like, I get an order, so it's already sold. And I know exactly what I'm painting, I know who I'm painting, and so it's just literally on like a list, and just kind of go down the list. And I have no deadlines except for that one. I don't have to worry about like a full-on deadline. And then Alex, from painting to painting, like he has some ideas, but I think often he's like, yeah, I'm not really sure which one I'm going to paint next, or which vision I have that I'm going to do next. And so then he has like to work on this whole accumulation of shows over a course of like a year, where there's a few shows in the interim period that he might sell some work, like collaborative shows. But mainly it's this like full body of work that he's like working on, and then there's going to be like hopefully a big sort of chunk of people who buy his work then, but doesn't really know who's going to buy it and how many you're going to sell. And so it's just a totally different format and a completely different business model as a painter.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That is time for this session. So I think we'll take a 5-minute break.
It's good.
Shane is doing awesome on the actual mic going, and we're back.
Oh, yeah, I was.
Wait, hold on. I don't even know. I think I'm still on mute. Hold on. And we were back. Or we were back?
You're good. All right. So questions. Let's see. Where were we? Let's see. When working larger scale, do you approach the entire form at once, or do you prefer working section by section in order to not overwhelm yourself?
I found that I can hit the color better if I like put down stuff all over the place and kind of do a thin underpainting or a gouache or whatever you want to call it, because it's just so big that you can just get the color so wrong. I did a portrait of my wife, and I totally did that, where I was like, I had like a color study, poster study I made of it. And then I realized as I was doing it that like working to scale, I needed to fix a lot of issues. So yeah, I think that it is helpful to kind of work all over the place. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I kind of do what I call a block-in, but like a first kind of sketchy pass over the whole entire thing, just so everything sort of relates, and then I can go and finish kind of section by section. But if it was just like all one-tone canvas, I would not just like start painting one part and grow out from there. That sounds like I'd mess a lot of stuff up that way.
So when y'all say that you kind of put down like some kind of underpainting all over the whole thing, at least somewhat quickly to get a good idea of the colors. Do you then zoom into one area and then work on that, or do you develop it pretty uniformly?
I kind of I'll do the blocking, which is doing the whole thing, and that might take me even more than one day, but that's kind of in context to the whole. And then I will zoom in and just kind of if it's a person in a landscape, I'll then zoom in and start painting the portrait of the person, and then go to their hands. And, yeah, so kind of zoom out, then zoom in.
Yep, I would say the same. If I'm working on a particular area, I think in part of my training is there's a certain amount of window shading that is carried through. So with that, I think that training just kind of overrides sometimes and go straight into doing that.
I don't see if there's any questions. Right, I had to reload the YouTube page. It looks like the internet on the laptop is slow.
It's a little slow because of Wi-Fi is a little spotty in that area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and so I tried reloading it, and now the questions are taking a while to come back. So,
All right. Gives me a chance to catch up to Alex.
I would say the same.
Really have enjoyed some of these questions today. I feel like I say that every time, but maybe that's why I like doing this so much. It's always interesting to hear what people are thinking about. And we're artists. We love talking art.
Yep.
there is also a chance that when I reloaded it, it doesn't make older comments appear. Or not comments. The chat. So, yeah, maybe if they.
Also, there's the comments are also here.
Ooh. Okay. Okay, I can view the question somewhere else. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right, so I can see the questions. So let's see. All right, someone says painting skin colors in portrait painting is much harder in Alla prima than painting in layers. What are you thinking during the process of recreating changes on chroma and value to reach some realism? And maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that Alla prima is easier than painting in layers. But yeah, what are you thinking about during the process in terms of changes in chroma and value?
Alla prima is harder because if you're used to painting in layers, you tend to paint a bit thinner, and I find that one of the reasons I do it is because it is a challenge for me. I think for some people it's easier because that was their practice and expertise. But for me, I'm not an alla prima painter, and yet I'm here painting alla prima. So it most certainly is a little bit more difficult for me. But I rise to the challenge, and I love it. But part of the challenges are that when you lay something down, it starts lifting it up as well. And so you have to like learn how much you can lay down and what, you know. So that's part of what makes it difficult. But the other thing with color, I like the idea of the color because it actually creates, I think, a bit more of a color harmony because you're kind of mixing your colors into each other a lot more. So yeah, I don't actually know if I did an excellent job of answering that question, but Alex, do you have thoughts there?
I mean, yeah, pretty much exactly what you said. I'm having a super tough time with the paint just lifting up every brushstroke I'm trying to do. And so it's very hard to get it to a natural finish. But I do like some of the freshness and like the color and stuff that I get, although alla prima I am sometimes making really quick decisions, so it's not always the best decisions. Mm-hmm. So it's like if I could have one really long alla prima session where my paint would actually lay down well, that would be nice.
I always think of like alla prima painting as like the same as speed chess. You know, it's just a different, or I also make the comparison of like jazz versus classical. Like classical and jazz are two totally different things. Part of being able to make quick decision making in jazz is based off of all this like muscle memory that you've done just a million times over and over and over again to like get something to like to be able to do it in an instant, and it's sort of being able to like in a talented way and beautiful way make like all these musical things happen all at once. And I kind of feel like that's the same way alla prima is like just like this instant moment of all your training kind of being put to one point in time, and it's really beautiful. But then there's like this classical way, which is like long chess, where you've got all these layers, and every moment and like movement is like scrutinized over and thought of and like figured out. And it's hard, and there's pitfalls to both. It's hard to keep the freshness in the layered kind when the freshness is kind of what comes natural to an alla prima painting. And then you have the other side where you get to have like this particular design of depth to a piece, but you can lose and it can get stiff on you if you don't pay attention to keeping sort of a level of freshness in the piece, because you're kind of like working on just all these small little parts all at once. So all right, I actually might put in a little bit of hair now.
Thanks.
Wanted to make sure the most important features, the most beautiful features were done first. Now, yeah, we don't want her to remain bald. That would be good.
All right, we have a question that says, let's see, Alex is saying, I started painting on ampersand museum series gesso boards, which is basically gessoed hardboard. Do you guys think hardboard makes for a good painting structure? I've heard widely varying opinions.
I used to only paint on hardboard until I found out about the dye bond. And it worked. I'm sure it's definitely probably not as archival. But anyway.
Yeah, the archival police might come after you, but
there is people out there who have spent decent money on a painting I've done on hardboard. So I hope nothing happens.
yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, you could totally paint on that, and that's totally fine. I think that it is just as cheap, and the longevity of your painting could last even longer if you painted on ACM panel or aluminum composite material panel that you can get at any sign shop in your area. So that being said, that's usually my recommendation. If I were to do a panel that was pre-made, I mean, I feel like there are a couple of people out there. You've got George O'Hanlon has a thing called Artifacts, and he does a lead primed panel on aluminum composite material. And then there is Raymar, and they have a aluminum panel as well, and they adhere all sorts of stuff to it: paper, gessoed boards, some of the finest linens that are out there, like Artfix, and what's another one that Clausen's 13 and 23 and all the other numbers. So they're a good option as well. So I'd look into them. The gesso board, is he talking about the actual brand gesso board? Because there is like an actual brand out there.
Yeah, because that's the ampersand one.
Ampersand, okay. I've painted on it, and it just feels like your paint just sinks straight into it. And so for that reason, I don't particularly care for it. But some people might like that effect, and that's okay too.
I feel like that would come in handy right now.
Yeah.
If my paint just sunk in so I could...
So you can play with it past that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Would some of that sinking in, would that be affected by if it's, I guess, gesso primed versus if you're using like a lead oil ground or something?
Yeah, I think it is because it's an acrylic gesso on those ampersand boards.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have some discussion about various panels in the chat. Somebody is saying that they use hardboard that is sealed, and they say all 6 surfaces, which I guess I hadn't really thought about, sealing. So not just the front and not just the back, but there's also, I guess, the 4 very small edges that are easy to forget about that I guess water damage or something like that could really mess it up if it seeps in there. I think they're saying that they seal it with both gesso and Rublev lead oil primer. So that's then somebody is saying that they switched to dye bond and love it. It's just a few bucks more than good sealed hardboard. About 50/50 lead primer on the ACM raw and adhered lead primed linen. Let's see. Michelle asks, is that the same as dry mounting? Have you ever heard of that?
Dry mounting. I feel like I have, but I don't know what it is necessarily.
Yeah, me neither.
I feel like I've heard the name though. Wish I could help more there. But I don't have no clue what that is. Is it that? It's not that heat mounting that people do. Is it where it's like that plastic adhesive that you put in between it, and then you have like the heat board that comes on top?
Would that be like putting linen on board or something?
Mm-hmm.
No.
So I'm
That's
assuming
what
that dry mounting is some sort of form of dry mounting. But if you're talking about mounting, then you're talking about putting some sort of linen on the actual panel versus using the panel itself.
Okay, so she clarified. She says, let's see, your work getting mounted gets placed into a vacuum or heat mounting.
Heat mounting, see? Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And that would be like linen being mounted onto a board.
Yeah, with like a heat press that adheres it with that particular type of.
I'm assuming there would be no painting on there.
No, you then paint. You didn't.
Because that would be scary.
That would be very scary. Don't try that at home, kids.
All right, so
scary.
We have just reached the end of this session.
No.
This is the last 20-minute session. Is that correct?
It's the board of gate. Yes.
This is the last 20-minute section.
Yes, but let's see how many.
The last session will add just a few minutes for the delay. So yes, the last 20-minute session. Yeah.
Okay, yes. So this is the last 20-minute session.
Gracious enough to give us that extra time.
My paint just doesn't want to stick.
I promised I'd give her hair, so I'm going to finish out some of this hair. Boy, the last session, it's pretty quiet. Everybody's like, we're serious here, going, oh, we gotta get this thing finished right.
Yeah, I guess if anybody has any questions out there, this is your last chance for the next month to get them answered. So, yeah.
Spoken like a true salesman, my friend. I love it. Yeah. Be one whole month till the next time. Diva, stop mocking the talent. By the way, everybody out there, if y'all haven't noticed, I actually called Divya Diva as her nickname. She's not a diva. It just happens to be that her name sounds very similar. And it's our endearing term for her here.
There you go, Uncle Louie.
And I'm Uncle Louie. It's funny because I'm like whispering to myself thinking no one can hear me, but I have this mic like right by me and I'm like, oh no, that was the wrong move. Oh gosh, what am I gonna do now?
Or me trying to muffle my burps after that, after that fizzy drink, bubbly water.
Yep. Yeah, I apologize for any like muffled burps that people hear on this, because I've definitely been like, yeah, when we do this, and oh, if any of my like sophisticated clients were actually paying attention to this live stream, I'd be kind of embarrassed. I will say I commend her on holding a smile most of this time. That's quite a feat for several hours. My face would be shaking.
Alex, earlier we discussed a little bit about your upcoming show. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what your process is for developing? Like, do you have like a theme that you generally start with, and then you make pieces centered around that, or do you just, kind of come up with each piece independently and then try to figure out how to connect them thematically, or what is your process for that?
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't have a theme first. I kind of, each painting is kind of a new idea, and it's my quote-unquote, I guess, style hopefully just flows through all of them and makes them feel related, but I am not trying too hard to keep it in a theme. But it is a good chance to kind of, when you get interested in a sort of idea, doing multiple versions of it. So I have in this show a lot more outdoor, like figures outdoors.
Whoa!
Sorry, that was me.
That was awesome.
You were saying.
You were saying?
Yeah, a lot more outdoor figures. So it kind of feels like a theme, but honestly, a lot of it has to do with, I don't have the greatest light in my apartment, so it forced me to go outside and get some awesome natural light outside. So, but yeah, and I kind of write down my ideas when they come, and sometimes a painting for the show will come out of an idea that I write down, or sometimes I'll finish a painting and have no idea, and I'm like, okay, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna think of something. And then you're gonna have to find a model, or like figure out what model works with this idea, and just go for it.
Actually, there's a certain level of like accountability that's really great there, where you're forced to like, okay, sit down, I'm gonna really hack out this idea I had, versus like sometimes like, oh, I have this great idea. Well, that's all it was,
Mm-hmm.
And because there's no accountability to have to get it done, and sometimes I regret that there isn't. So there's the silver lining of that sometimes,
Yeah, It is. It does have. I have definitely pushed myself in different ways, having like being forced to create constantly.
There is an interesting question. What are your thoughts on subtractive painting? For example, using a bristle brush or even a palette knife to lift the paint to reveal the toned panel from underneath.
Dum, dum, dum.
A reduction method, I mean, that's been used many times over and over. I actually think that it has a beautiful effect in different realms. So, not opposed to it. I think some people are really good at it. But as far as me, I've done it a couple of times, and I would love to try it again. I don't know how much I did a lot more of like reducing stuff in when I was in school as like a trial period of trying something else out, but I haven't done it in quite some time. So
Yeah, Richard Schmidt has these kind of they're paintings, but they're almost done in just like red or like kind of a sepia tone. And you can tell he's kind of like wiping out and just using the one, like basically like one paint color and then the tone of the canvas. And just creates such a beautiful looking thing. I love it.
Yeah, I know I have seen Alex, like I think, I know at least with a palette knife, maybe he's also used sandpaper, because you mentioned the sandpaper earlier with the Odd Nerdrum School, you know, like just scraping away at a painting. Yeah, you want to maybe say something a little bit about that. I mean, I guess you can't demonstrate it here, but yeah, explain some of that because you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, there's like, I did it, I'm on the still life I'm working on. There's some parts where I kind of painted it thick, and then a little bit lighter, and then almost kind of glazed. Then once it was completely dry, tried to like glaze over it, and then kind of wipe away and kind of scrape at it to let the paint sink into the ridges of the thick paint, and then get that light coming through again. And it's also a nice way to kind of make edges blend together and stuff by kind of scraping and sanding. But
Josh asks, do you guys ever play around with limited palettes such as Zorn?
I love playing around with limited palettes. I recommend it a lot too, just because it actually can create a better color harmony. I don't do it a lot in my actual paintings. I mean, my palette by nature is a bit limited, and I only use about 4 colors. But when I'm doing things like this, I mean, I've tried 3 or 4 new colors on these live streams for the fun of it, just to see what they would do. So for that reason, yes, I think it's fantastic.
yeah, I'm working with a limited palette now, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors. When usually my full palette has like 14 different paints on it. And I find I usually get like the same exact effect. And I always think, oh, I just need to start painting a full like gallery painting I want to take to a finish just with a limited palette. It would mainly just for the ease of putting my paint out in the morning.
Yeah, man, totally.
We have 2 related questions, I think. So the first is, have you ever worked on a large-scale painting, what is the largest painting you have completed? So that's the first. And then the second is, do you ever paint a portrait larger than life size?
I wouldn't be opposed to painting a portrait larger than life for the fun of trying it, because I think it'd be an interesting experience. But I don't do it as a profession. So typically, just because my work is considered more classical and people are buying it because it has a bit more of a classical feel. So due to that, painting larger than life gives this like a particular modern or contemporary feel that people are just not paying me for. And it's just my identity's not wrapped up in that necessarily. So that being said, that's why I wouldn't. But I would for the fun of doing it, you know. When I was much younger, Chuck Close, when I was in like college, was one of the people I liked. And I mean, he paints these monumental portraits of himself. So scale is an important feature of creating your poetry. And something I talk about a lot in my workshops. And that's an example of one of the things I actually show is one of like Chuck Close's pieces that are just these massive ones. And there's people lots of people doing it today now, but he was kind of like one of the trailblazers back in the day doing it. And then like using Rembrandt's tiny little etching that he did of himself that's no bigger than a postage stamp, but everybody knows the etching, but don't realize how small it is, and it's just insanely small.
Yeah, it's like going back to the artist statement thing we were talking about. It's like, for me, my artist statement or my why or my goals, painting something larger than life kind of doesn't fit that. Mm-hmm. It kind of takes away from a reality to me when I'm trying to create like a very real like moment that you can connect with. I don't know, but so I personally wouldn't do that myself. But and then asked the largest thing you've ever painted. It's funny, when I was a lot worse at painting, I painted a lot bigger, and all that stuff is at my mom's house. She has like this huge like snowscape scene with a figure in the snow like above her bed. And it's bad. But it's probably, 70 something inches wide, which I guess isn't huge, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like at least within classical painting, like larger than life is generally, would primarily have been done like if you're doing like the a cathedral or something like that on the ceiling, or if it's a maybe if you're doing like some Greek gods or something. And because I don't remember where it was, but there was something I was reading that was talking about how like I think when we see something that is smaller than life, it feels normal, but as soon as you make it bigger than life, it kind of freaks us out a little bit, and something just feels off. And so I think it has to be in a context where there has to be something superhuman about it for it to kind of make sense to our eye, why we're seeing this thing larger than it should be.
Mm-hmm. Or just like it's really far away, like you said, like on a ceiling or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've told that to a couple of my clients that have asked about like what size should I get. I was like, well, you can go even larger than life if you have a castle and you have a 20-foot, or a 60-foot distance between when the person enters the room and they see your painting, But for the most part, most people don't have castles.
I don't think, did you say what the largest painting you've done is?
Largest painting I've done is 12 feet by 8 feet, but it was not figurative. It was when I was in college, and I got commissioned to do this like modern piece that was a triptych. It was 3 paintings. It was my largest, still to this day, my largest commission money-wise. Well, largest single commission. And well, I guess the Kane family's kind of past that, but it was for these 3 pieces, like at one go, and yeah, they were huge. I had to like have a special carpenter build the panels, and you know, they went into this person's home in Oxford, Mississippi. In a way, it was quite fun, and enjoyed trying something different and new, but ultimately decided that's not the direction I wanted to go.
So when you say it was more modern and not figurative, you mean specific? It was abstract?
It was an abstract painting.
Do you feel like, I don't know, some of your dabbling in abstract painting has affected your realist painting at all?
That's a good question. I don't think so. It's funny because it's just like a different mindset where I'm like thinking more about like what I'm thinking more about like the details of things, and so it's that yet again it's that German in me when I'm painting like portrait work. But when I'm doing like the abstract work, it's almost like you're freed from having to think that way, which is, well, it's kind of fun.
All right, so that was the time. So I think we are.
I didn't get a countdown, man.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're done.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was looking at the questions and forgot to, give you all the warning.
Okay. No, you good? You want to keep going? You want like 2 minutes? Thank you so much. Thank you all, everyone, for participating. Are you having a little wide angle? Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for participating this evening. We have thoroughly enjoyed this. We'll make sure to post these. These will be for sale. Kelly will make sure that they're up and give you direction of where you're supposed to go as far as that's concerned. If you want more information about it, I promise you she'll also have it in our email list. And we have like a newsletter we put out telling you exactly what all of our dates are. At the end of this month, we will be doing Mackenzie Swinson will be being released. It will be her figurative painting for our subscribers onto our platform. You can also purchase it individually if you would like, as well as any of our videos that are on our platform. The link will also be in the description below for to guide you to our Atelier Live system. And also we have Donald Journey coming the second week of July. So he is always an incredible painter. He's been doing this for forever, and he is always a joy to watch paint. It's just like magic. So we also will be doing a critique for my subscribers where you can submit your work. If you are one of our subscribers, submit your work, and I will look it over, and I'll try to Photoshop with it. And it's something that I try to do to continue to connect with our audience. But yet again, thank you so much for modeling for us this evening. She was so lovely and just was a statue the whole time. Thank y'all, Divya, Nick, for being behind the camera. And we look forward to seeing y'all next time.